so it looks like we are live. I'm going to mute that. And I'm going to wait a little bit for people to join. And I'm going to see if I can pin my video. See if that works to start out. And there should be about a 20-second delay. Great, okay. All right, hello to everyone joining us today. I see that there are a few people watching. I'm gonna get started, and I am gonna just share some information about our exhibit and our virtual booth before the office hour really starts. My name is Rachel, and I am marketing manager at the University Press of Florida. And just as a brief introduction, welcome. This is our first editor office hour of the fall 2020 conference season. Actually all of the conferences that we usually attend as an exhibitor have been either completely canceled or transitions to virtual formats. Most of them have transitioned to virtual formats. And one of those is the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, which is usually happening around now. The organization has transformed it into a month-long conference with panels scheduled on a weekly basis throughout the month of September. And this is a conference that we usually attend. This year, we have set up a virtual booth that attendees can browse. The URL is above me if you would like to go and browse all the books that we're talking about, plus a lot more. There are a lot of books in the virtual booth. The URL is upress.ufl.edu/ALH20. And if you use discount code ALH20, you will receive very large discounts on all of the books in the virtual booth. There are discounts around 50% to 60% for most of our books, and we are also offering free shipping on all orders. We want to make it easy for all of you who would usually be attending our stopping by our booth at the conference to be able to purchase our books for the same price as it would have been at the conference. There are a few other special promotions that we are doing this year as part of our virtual booth. One of them is that we have released 5 of our books in new paperback editions in the past year. And that's pretty exciting because those books are now available at really great prices. And in addition to that, in addition to them being available as paperbacks, we are also offering 50% off the ebook editions of these books through September 30th. And if you would like some more information about what books those are, and you would like to read about those books, visit our blog at floridapress.blog. You will see one of our recent blog posts, Welcome to our 2020 ASALH virtual booth. there is a section in that blog post describing with more information about the half-price ebooks. Again, they're available through September 30th. They're available wherever books are sold. So whatever your preferred e-reader is, you should be able to access it, the books there. The other thing I wanted to mention is that we are running a giveaway, an audiobook giveaway in connection with the conference. The book Black Panther in Exile was recently released in an audiobook version, and we have 5 free copies to give away to those who sign up for our email list. On that same post on our blog, that's floridapress.blog, there's information on how to sign up for our email list. You will be entered in a drawing to win a free copy of the new audiobook. All right, so that's about all I wanted to mention as far as our virtual booth. I will be monitoring the chat on YouTube. So if anyone does have any questions, please feel free to type them in there, and we will do our best to answer them. And for now, I am going to turn it over to Sian Hunter. Sian is our editor for African American Studies, and I think she's going to get us started out by talking about some of our new books in our in this year's virtual booth.
Great, thank you so much, Rachel. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us at this inaugural Acquisitions Editor Hour, and held in conjunction with the ASALH Academic Conference. As Rachel mentioned, I thought I'd get us started by recapping some of the books that Florida has published since last year's ASALH conference in North Charleston. The first book I wanted to mention to y'all is Paolu's Diaspora, Black Internationalism and Environmental Justice, which is by Kito Swan. In this book, Dr. Swan focuses on the work of environmental activist Paolu Camara Cafego, who was born in Bermuda, lived in Cuba and the United States while he studied ecological engineering, worked in Kenya during the independence struggles of the mid-60s, and contributed to sustainable development initiatives. Along with his ecological work, Camara Cafego also coordinated activist conferences and workshops worldwide, building a network of Black internationalist organizers across the Atlantic, Indian, and Pacific Ocean realms. And those networks connected a lot of Black intellectuals such as C.L.R. James, Sonia Sanchez, Vanessa Griffin, and Jeff Donaldson. What particularly excites me about that book is that by moving beyond US-centric views of Black power, Dr. Swan builds a vital set of relationships between Black power, Pan-Africanism, and environmental justice. One of the other books that Florida has published recently is Black Panther in Exile, the Pete O'Neill story. And this is one of the books that Rachel had mentioned in the free ebook audiobook giveaway. This book is by Paul Magnarella, and it relays the life and court case of Pete O'Neill, who founded the Kansas City branch of the Black Panther Party in 1969. Arrested and convicted for transporting a firearm across state lines, O'Neill feared for his life in the wake of Fred Hampton's assassination by white police in Chicago. So O'Neill and his wife, Charlotte, fled to Africa. The O'Neills have lived in exile in Tanzania ever since, where they have developed agricultural and community programs. And they've also built a school for local children that hosts American Study Abroad students. One of the unique facets of this book is its structure, in that the first part of the book is Pete's life story, largely told through his own words. And then the second part of the book is lawyer Paul Magnarella's detailing the appeals process to overturn O'Neill's wrongful conviction. Magnarella reviews the evidence of judicial errors and perjury that denied justice to Pete O'Neill in federal courts. There are many ways to tell a story and write a book, and ultimately we thought that having Pete O'Neill speak his views in the pages of this book was the right way to go. Another book that Florida has published recently is The Public Health Nurses of Jim Crow, Florida by Christine Arlen. And this book examines the rise of public health nursing in Florida to show the impacts of race, gender, class, and geography in health outcomes and health access. By focusing on the mid-20th century, Dr. Arlen can bring forward the tenacity of both Black and white public nurses and revealing their remarkable efforts to reach rural residents in the Florida scrub. She also shows how they translated medical practices to repeatable self-therapeutic practices for rural populations, and the ways in which these nurses networked to secure funding and materials for public health programming. What I really appreciate about this book is her archival evidence and her use of oral histories to reveal the many strategies that, as pioneering professional women in a state where white supremacy ruled the social structures, these nurses found innovative ways to serve rural families with much needed health care. Another book that Florida has recently published is NASA and the Long Civil Rights Movement. And this is edited by Brian Odom and Stephen Waring. The essays in this volume examine the ways that NASA's goal of space exploration both conflicted with and aligned with the efforts for social justice. The book offers new insights into the complicated relationship between the space program and the civil rights movement, especially when federal programs and facilities were being built throughout the Jim Crow South. Aspects that I particularly like in that book is that it also offers international perspectives on NASA, such as the closure of NASA's satellite facilities in South Africa. And this book also talks about ways in which to locate and preserve evidence of African American contributions to the space program. Finally, one of the books that most recently came out, as in just a few weeks ago, is a biography of Alfred Hare. It's written by Gary Monroe, who's written a number of other books on the African American artist collective known as the Highwaymen. Alfred Hare was one of the few formally trained highwaymen, and I'm going to show you just one of his landscapes here. He pursued his art with a passion through the peak years of the civil rights movement, creating extemporaneous landscapes and selling them door to door throughout Florida. This is a long-awaited biography, and it highlights the intensity with which Hare shared his creative energies and entrepreneurial efforts during his too short life. So those are just some of the books that Florida has been working on and publishing. As Rachel mentioned, there are lots of others on the website, and please do check those out.
All right, thank you, Sian. I also want to mention all those books are available in our virtual booth. And again, that is, the URL is upress.ufl.edu/ALH20. And all of those books are available, they're out. And that leads me to my next question. Sian, I am wondering if you could give us a sneak peek of some of the books that are coming down the line, some forthcoming books from the University Press of Florida that people should be looking out for.
Sure. Love to talk about new books. We've got a number coming through in the next 6 or 7 months. In December, we'll have a collection on wage-earning slaves, which is edited by Claudia Varela and Manuel Barcia. This volume is going to be the first systematic study of coartation, which is a process by which slaves work toward purchasing their freedom in installments. By focusing on Cuba, The essays in this book reveal the ways in which the process was often rife with obstacles that blocked slaves from achieving their liberty. Another book that will be available in February of 2001 is Atlantic Passages, Race, Mobility, and Liberian Colonization by Robert Murray. And Liberia is usually seen as an endpoint in the journeys of African Americans. But in Atlantic Passages, Dr. Murray studies how many Liberian settlers didn't remain in Africa, but they returned repeatedly to the United States. And so he explores the way in which this movement of Americo-Liberians shaped the construction of race in the Atlantic world. Another book that will be out in April of 2001 is Slavery and Freedom in the Shenandoah Valley During the Civil War Era, which is by Jonathan Noailles. And this is interesting to me because the Shenandoah Valley area of Northern Virginia is one of the most contested theaters in the American Civil War, but very little has been written on African Americans' resistance to slavery there and their formal and informal war participation. But using really extraordinarily deep archival sources, Noailles is able to provide an important and much needed comparative examination of the lives of free and enslaved Blacks. And he argues that the way that the war played out there and the particular tumult there in the region affected not only the dynamics of resistance, but also after emancipation, the direction and character of freed people's efforts for autonomy and community. We've got lots of books in development way far down the line. Some of these are still being written. We've got photography books. The South Florida photographer Johan Rehaman is working on a volume of Black Florida. And historian Sonia Ramsey, who's presenting at ASALH this year, she is working on her biography of educator Bertha Maxwell Roddy. So lots of great books in the works, more to come. We'd love to hear about the works that y'all are working on in the academic community. So I hope you'll stay in touch with us on those projects as well.
All right, thank you. That is very cool. I'm really looking forward to those books. On behalf of any scholars who may be watching us right now who are thinking about their own research, thinking about possibly submitting a book proposal, submitting a manuscript for consideration, are there any specific areas or topics that you are looking for right now as in book proposals or in any book ideas in conversations that you may be having with scholars? Is there anything in particular that you are looking for?
Well, our list at Florida is really growing and expanding and deepening. So we are open to all sorts of topics. I would say that in African American history, our core areas at the moment, time-wise, in terms of periodization, would be, say, from 18th century through to the present. But again, we are open to all time periods. As some of the new books and some of the forthcoming books show, we're very interested in the global reach of Black intellectual work. We have a number of books, and I'm always interested to hear about Black internationalism in the 20th century. And we're also really interested in African diasporic history throughout the Caribbean, North America, South America, and worldwide, because the Black Pacific is a really important area that needs more study, and we're excited about bringing forward, especially Dr. Swan's book in that regard, but our Global Garveyism book that was published last year contributed a number of exciting pieces there too. And as always, we're always interested in African American studies that involve biography and literary studies as well. So I would say that we have several key areas, but again, the list is expanding, and I'm really eager just to hear what people are working on, topics that they're finding, because it's really that conversation with scholars, finding out what research what archives they're able to get into that helps publishers follow and then help spread the published work throughout to readers.
All right, so I just wanted to repeat just a reminder that if anyone would like to ask some questions, would like to ask Sian some questions, please feel free to type them into the YouTube chat, and I will pass those. I will relay those to Sian, and we'll do our best to answer them. Sian, here's another question for you related to the previous one. Do you have any advice for scholars who are interested, thinking about submitting a proposal, and are about to take that next step?
Sure. I think one of the most important parts of the proposal is that very first couple of paragraphs where you're describing your project. And I encourage people to take a couple of drafts focusing on the scope and the contribution and the argument and the methods that they're bringing forward in their work. Even though proposals are an ephemeral document, right? It's not going to stick with the book as it goes through the book's life. That proposal's really key in, it's your calling card to the editor and the publisher. And we use that to get that immediate understanding of this book's contribution. So do focus on those first paragraphs where you're describing the project. It's also helpful, I think, to include an annotated table of contents, because that lets the editor see how the argument and the narrative unfolds across the entire book. And then it just gives little snippets. You know, those annotations don't need to be long, just a sentence or two or three, just to kind of give a sense of what's going on in those chapters. And again, the way in which the argument and the narrative unfolds across the book proposal, across the book itself.
All right, and another question for you. Are there any in your conversations at I don't know whether at the exhibits that we attend or otherwise with prospective authors, are there any misconceptions about publishing that tend to come up, or any common misconceptions or frequently asked questions that you could address?
That's a real good question. I think one thing that's important to realize is that even though, like, the book process ends up with a book, the process itself from press to press has subtle differences. So I find oftentimes people who have published a number of books kind of think that the way it was done at one press is exactly the way that it would be done at another press. And while, as I said, it's quite similar, it's really, really important to have conversations with an editor at the press that you're considering publishing with, to find out what those variations may be at that particular house. That way you just know more about the process itself and can make better decisions for yourself and your book, and not get caught up in misunderstandings that the editor may not have made clear at the front end. And it's little things like the timing or what's presented to a university press board, or again, the timing and the way in which the cover art decisions or the marketing copy review folds. That way you just know more and you're more comfortable with the process, and that just helps you make those better decisions for yourself. So I think that, to me, is probably one of the ways in which it's a little bit surprising that this, like I said, you end up with a book, but the process is subtly different at each house. So finding that out and having those conversations are really critical, I think.
All right, thank you. And I have one final question. In closing, this year has been has been rough for the entire academic community, and changes that we've specifically experienced. One of the big ones is not going to a lot of the conferences that we usually attend. And I'm just wondering if you can talk a little bit about what you miss about those in-person conferences, when we'd usually have our booth in the exhibit hall and you'd be able to meet with scholars in person.
I don't miss the conference coffee. That's, I think probably many of us have better coffee at home. So that's one plus, but really, I truly miss people. I miss talking with people. I miss the excitement when an author sees his or her book live and in person and in public for the first time. I miss just hearing what people are reading or using in classes, with their students, what they're experiencing with their students. I miss that, I think, and I'm not unique, of course. I think many of us are missing the connections that we have. That is one of the special things about being able to travel to an academic conference. It is great in the virtual conference world to maintain some of those connections, but I think what I've been rediscovering is that great 19th century piece of technology, the telephone, which at least lets us share a conversation in real time. If we're not can't gather in person, then we can talk in person. And so, yeah, I miss the conversations and catching up with people and hearing what's going on right there in person together.
Yeah, thank you so much. We are gonna wrap up the office hour now, and I will just reiterate, for those who may have missed at the beginning, the link to our virtual booth where you can see all of our new books that we've talked about in this office hour, as well as many more books. Is up there. It's upress.ufl.edu/ALH20. And if you use code ALH20 at checkout, all of our books are going to be available at really good discount prices and free shipping. And I believe this offer runs through December 16th. So you have all fall. We are running our conference virtual booths the entire exhibit season. You have all fall to take a look at what's there. All right. Thanks so much to everyone who has been watching, and thank you, Sean, for doing this.
Thank you for organizing it, Rachel.
Yeah, no problem.